I think one of the things that you don't underestimate, like one of the things you should all understand is that the true only way to deal with fascism when that takes root in a society is it's kind of pretty straightforward. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna skip over the like credits and Russian.
Moscow. Red Square. June 24th,
We
1945.
got a nice AI voice. Nice.
Here by the walls of the ancient Kremlin, the whole country celebrates the victorious return of its brave sons, heroes of unprecedented battles on all fronts of the great patriotic war, from the Barents Sea to the Black Sea. The combined battle regiments, the platoons that traversed the Dnieper and Oder rivers, those who conquered the snowy passes of the Caucasus Mountains, those who liberated Kiev and Minsk, Sevastopol and Odessa, those who fought on the streets of Budapest, Königsberg, Vienna, and the ones who raised the victory flag over Berlin. 200 flags and banners of the defeated German army are brought to the feet of the heroes. Distinguished.
Let me see if I can find one of my favorite parts. This is what happens with fascism at the end. At the end of fascism, what happens is the enemies of fascism parade over their destroyed and defeated corpses. Like, this is what fascism leads to: utter defeat. Whether it was in China under the Nationalists, whether it's the fascists of Spain, whether it's the fascists of Italy, the fascists of Germany, they end up shattered and defeated. Like this.
In the heroic battle for Sevastopol, the city of everlasting glory. Baltic commanders that destroyed the German divisions surrounding the city of Leningrad.
These are the most like sacred fascist banners. They bled and died, and it's just trash. Think about all the fascists that died just so they could be a barely mentioned footnote. Fuck, that's awesome. Oh, fuck, that's great. Don't worry. It'll happen again. It'll happen again. What I was, there's this new, like, libs, like, Chinese Civil War thing. Like, a YouTube series.
In China.
And they're like doing a like month by month. And like the fascist Chinese nationalists. It's so fucking crazy, man. how much they're fucking scum. And even in the most propagandistic, like liberal retelling
is TimeGhost
of the Civil War, it's
Winter
just so apparent how the nationalists were scum. And how Chiang Kai-shek is one of the most evil pieces of shit who's ever lived. He's literally a Nazi. Like he is a fascist. He was the Adolf Hitler of China. And Americans pretend Americans pretend he's good or something. This guy was a fucking rabid dog. Let me see if I can it's like died, hunger. I don't know why the transcript is broken because I'm like a 99% sure they talk about it in this video.
Manchuria, but Chiang is determined to hold on. Chiang thus lost his last chance to save what was left of the armies he had committed to the takeover of Manchuria. By mid-1948, the power balance there had shifted irreversibly against him. The communists now claimed to have 700,000 regular troops in the region, plus 330,000 local or second-line forces, and 1.6 million civilian support workers. The government's increasingly demoralized troops numbered only about 450,000 with no effective second-line replacements. Mao will soon give the order to finish off the nationalists in Manchuria. But first, the communists wrap up some unfinished business elsewhere. The East China Field Army finally takes almost all of Shandong province by mid-1948, leaving the government in control of just a few isolated strongpoints.
Oh wait, the dollar is collapsing? Is the dollar collapsing? Holy shit, the 30-year is almost back to 5%? Okay, there was a blip. It looks like it's not... There was a blip. Somebody put a big sell of treasuries there, but it looks like it's not quite at the peak. Okay, I saw the blip. All right, so I don't know if anybody, maybe somebody put a big market sell order and they got fucked.
Over the coming months, the communists also take much of southern Shaanxi, including the cities of Luoyang and Linfen. A few months later, Mao's forces lay siege to the provincial capital Jinan, which they captured towards the end of September, although Chiang does retain control of the port of Qingdao, for now at least. Against all American advice, Chiang refuses to evacuate his troops from Jinan until it is far too late. And in the end, the nationalist soldiers garrisoned there are so demoralized that most of them simply defect or surrender without much of a fight. By the time Jinan falls, the communists have linked up their territory in the provinces of Shaanxi, Chahar, Hubei, Shandong, and Henan into one bloc. And Mao declares a unified North China People's Government in August 1948 with its capital at Shijiazhuang. With that done, Lin Biao launches his 8th offensive in Manchuria in September. This is the Liaoshen campaign, named after the Manchurian province of Liaoning and its capital city, Shenyang. The communists have already been applying a lot of pressure to Shenyang and Changchun and are close to completely cutting them off from the outside world. In order to do so, Lin goes after the air and rail transport hub at Jinzhou, which the nationalists have been using to supply the two larger cities. On September 12th, he launches his attack, catching the government forces by surprise and isolating Jinzhou within about 2 weeks. Communist artillery...
Now, this entire time, nationalist China is getting massive military aid from the United States. We're talking about tanks, artillery, planes, warships, massive military advisors, money, like just absolutely a cascade of supplies and cash and money for Chiang Kai-shek.
Proves highly effective, and they soon have the nationalist airfield locked down, starving the defenders of food and ammunition. Then, the Red Army breaks through the outer defenses and fights its way through, street by street, house by house, until they force the Nationalists to surrender October 16th. 500 kilometers to the northeast, Lin has ordered his commanders to turn the besieged city of Changchun into a city of death, right? Over the summer, civilians survive on insects, grass, and even resort to cannibalism. By autumn, they've stripped the city for firewood. Those who try to leave have their valuables, gold, silver, cooking pots, salt, confiscated by nationalist sentries. They then become Roman deserters, hoping to reach the communist lines. But Lin's troops fire on them, and when they turn back, the nationalists refuse re-entry. Tens of thousands of people are left to die in the no man's land between the two armies. With no hope left, Chiang orders General Zhang Dongguo to attempt a breakout to Shenyang October 16th. But Zhang's position collapses when his 60th Army refuses to leave, turns its gun on his 7th Army, and surrenders the city to the communists. Mao accepts all defectors into the Red Army, allowing officers to keep their ranks. Total casualties are somewhere in the region of 150,000 to 250,000, including perhaps 150,000 civilians who die of starvation. The scale of death here at Changchun will remain mostly hidden for over half a century. Breaking the timeline of it here, but in 1989, a book will be published called White Snow, Red Blood, in which a communist colonel named Zhang Zhenglong compares the scale of death at Changchun to the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. He also reveals that, as well as death from starvation, the communist forces deliberately massacred thousands of civilians after the siege. Zhang's book will be suppressed.
Guys, they were like, yay, defectors, join our side. But then they just decided we're going to randomly shoot a bunch of civilians for no reason. Does that sound like Mao? Mm-hmm.
But all the censorship in the world cannot hide the grim truth that lies buried beneath the earth. When workers in Changchun started digging trenches for a new irrigation system in the summer of 2006, they made a gruesome discovery.
Guys, who do you think killed all the civilians? The nationalist forces that he just said were stealing every single piece of valuables from the civilians? Or was it the communists,
rich black soil
whose entire existence depended on the goodwill of the peasants?
Clogged with human remains. Below a meter of earth were thousands of skeletons closely packed together. When they dug deeper, the workers found several more layers of bones, stacked up like firewood. A crowd of local residents gathered around the excavated area was taken aback by the sheer size.
Like, the Civil War of China was fucking horrible. But even if you are like anti-Chinese Communist Party, everybody knows that this KMT was the bad guy. We're the bad guys. Like, everybody acknowledges it now. Like, when you study the Chinese Civil War, everyone kind of acknowledges they were the bad guys.
Of the burial site. Some thought that the bodies belonged to victims of the Japanese occupation during the Second World War. Nobody, except an elderly man, realized they had just stumbled on remnants of the Civil War. Lin's next target is Shenyang. Here, the pre-war population of 1.2 million has swelled to 4 million thanks to a refugee influx, and conditions are nearly as bad as in Changchun. Chiang Kai-shek's own orders have crippled the city's defenses. In early October, he sent about half of the 200,000 strong garrison in a failed attempt to reach the besieged troops in Jinjiao. As these troops tried to return, they were ambushed and largely destroyed by Lin Biao. That means that Lin's 300,000 troops faced just 100,000 or so nationalist defenders at Shenyang. In the end, panic grips the streets. Fights erupt over seats on trains and planes heading south, and law and order breaks down. Then the communists enter the city, and Shenyang surrenders on November 2nd after only token resistance. With that, The Battle of Manchuria is over. Lin Biao's Liaoshen campaign has been a remarkable success. Chiang's Manchurian force of 450,000 troops has been reduced to just one-third of its size through casualties and desertion, with those 150,000 escaping south of the wall. Mao now controls Manchuria with its huge industrial potential, fertile land, and vast pool of potential recruits. It is Mao Zedong who has won the first great victory of the Chinese Civil War. Before moving to the next campaign, it's worth stepping away from the battlefield. By late 1948, Chiang isn't just losing the war, he's also losing on the home front. Chiang is
this is very important. You have to understand that the fascist nationalists that the United States supported were criminals. They were also a drug cartel. You know, the KMT basically was partially supporting itself from the heroin trade. Like, you have to understand that these guys are pure fucking evil, and the fact that that anybody even tries to there's no reclaiming the KMT were legitimately Nazis. They were most ideologically aligned with Nazi Party of Germany. And the only reason they weren't allies of the Nazi Party is because the Nazis switched sides to the Japanese during World War II. Prior to switching sides, they were allies with this KMT.
Elected as president of the Republic by the National Assembly in April 48. And one of his first big decisions is to try and get a grip on the hyperinflation that has been impoverishing the Chinese people since the early 1940s. The situation is now so bad that Chinese paper mills actually make a profit by pulping the worthless banknotes. In July 1948, Chiang gets together with one of his economic advisors, T.V. Soong, to discuss a plan of action. Soong is not just any old advisor, by the way. He's also one of Chiang's brothers-in-law and one of the most influential people in the government. He spent much of World War II lobbying for American support in Washington. The KMT government decides to scrap the old currency, the Fabi, and launch a new currency called the gold yuan in August 1948 at a staggering exchange rate of 3 million to 1. But public trust in the new currency is low. The government hopes a major American stabilization loan will help, but Washington is growing skeptical of backing Chiang. Some of Chiang's advisors also point out, with the budget deficit at revenue equaling just 34% of spending, there's really no point reforming the currency without reining in spending. But this doesn't happen at all. Instead, the burden is passed on to ordinary people. Using emergency powers, Chiang freezes wages and prices, bans strikes and protests. He also demands that citizens surrender any gold, silver, or foreign currency in exchange for the new yuan. This raises
so they just robbed the entire population of everything they had.
$170 million, US dollars, but is deeply unpopular and hits China very much unequally. The wealthiest people with overseas assets in Hong Kong, the US, or Switzerland, they are
Do you think that guy, hey, do you think he went down with the ship? He actually died in San Francisco choking on a chicken bone at a big fancy party with a bunch of bankers.
Unaffected. Ultimately, the reform collapses as people simply expect the yuan to follow the Fabi into worthlessness. The rich hoard gold, dollars, other valuable goods and commodities, and by October 1948, the new currency has plunged in value even faster than the old one. Shops and restaurants are closing, prices are skyrocketing, and medical supplies are unobtainable. Chiang's son, Chiang Ching-kuo, tries to enforce the policy with an iron fist in Shanghai. But even there, the reform is doomed to failure. In Shanghai, Chiang mobilized criticism against hoarders and speculators, ordered the arrest and occasional execution of delinquents, and raided warehouses and suspects' homes, all to urge public compliance. But despite this moralistic dedication and the strenuous attempts at enforcement, the gold yuan plan failed. Shanghai was, in any case, not isolated from the rest of China, and the more successful Chang Qingkuo was, the greater the pressure on Shanghai businesses to sell their goods elsewhere, where prices were continuing to rise. Accordingly, the city began to experience a desperate shortage of both food and manufactured goods, nor did the government hold firm to its plan. When it imposed heavy new taxes on sales of certain consumer goods, such as tobacco, shopkeepers simply closed their doors until they won permission to raise their prices. By now, Chiang Kai-shek is also dealing with a pretty significant grassroots movement that blames the nationalist government for the war and demands peace at almost any cost. This view, that Chiang and his government are to blame for the war, is pretty widely held in nationalist areas. Essentially, it holds that Chiang and the KMT brought this war on themselves thanks to their corruption, failure to reform, and their unwillingness to reach...
So in other words, what he's saying here, and this is why I wanted to watch this, is the Communist Party won because the right wing in China was evil, incompetent, and corrupt, and the grassroots of the nation opposed them.
A reasonable compromise with the communists. The communists had won the balance of popular opinion during the peace negotiations of 1945 and 6. There was a general belief that they had been sincere, for example, at the Political Consultative Conference in January 46, when they agreed to several compromises aimed at avoiding all-out war. The government lost credibility in this contest when the KMT's Central Executive Committee unilaterally broke a number of conference agreements a few weeks later. Finally, the most important reason for directing anti-war sentiment primarily against the government was the general assumption that the strength of the CCP was being built upon the shortcomings of the KMT. The government was held responsible for not having remedied its defects during 20 years in power. Since 1945, there have been 4 major waves of student protest here, largely backed by faculty and public intellectuals. The students demand...
Which is all the shit they're trying to regulate and prevent here in the U.S. under Trump. They recognize that students and faculty are incredibly important for leading the masses, which is why they're trying to make it illegal for you to protest.
Peace, an end to U.S. support for the KMT, and a shift in spending from the military to civilian needs, especially education. While there are some student groups who support the government and receive KMT funding, the most talented leaders from the top universities are firmly anti-war. The government either fails to grasp or refuses to acknowledge how deeply student sentiment, not to mention that of much of the general public, has turned against it. The KMT seems to think that by cutting off the head of the movement, sometimes quite literally, the rest will fall. Government...
Sometimes quite literally, what they mean is kill kids. By the way, chat, you'll remember from the opening video that I sometimes play on my playlist, the Internationale. Part of this is hold on, right here. This is what he says. Sometimes quite literally, this is what he means. Sometimes quite literally, see, a right-wing American propagandist, they'll make up speculations about, you know, people being killed, but then when it's like, oh, they machine gunned down student protesters, then it's a short little quip. Sometimes quite literally.
Decision makers remain constricted by their belief that if only the very few real communist agitators among the students could be eliminated, their movement could be controlled. The consequent harsh tactics in turn further alienated the students.
Guys, my favorite harsh tactic. My favorite harsh tactic. My harsh tactics. This is what we call euphemism. This is what we call euphemism. Unarmed protesters. Harsh tactics, guys. Harsh tactics.
Their leaders, particularly officials of the university's self-governing associations, were the chief targets of beatings, arrests, and abduction by an assortment of law enforcement personnel. On the basis of tip-offs by informers, the arrest of student activists became a common occurrence. Blacklists of activists and suspected underground communists were drawn up. Students arrested or abducted often simply disappeared. Execution was the anticipated punishment for genuine communist agents if their identity
This is the KMT, by the way. This is the side we were behind.
Be ascertained. Torture.
This is who took over Taiwan. Okay? This is what Taiwan is.
Was also a common means of extracting information. The student protest movement has swelled from the arrival of tens or even hundreds of thousands of student refugees from communist-occupied areas. In Beijing, some 5,000 Manchurian student refugees have been left to starve on meager subsistence allowances, with many reduced to poverty, homelessness, begging, and petty crime. Seeing their futures vanishing before them, they decide to march on the Beijing Municipal Council in July 1948. Chiang's forces opened fire on them from armored cars, killing 14 students and wounding over 100. All the failings of the nationalists that we've covered so far today and in the early episodes are causing a serious strain on Chiang's legitimacy. Meanwhile, Mao is getting ready to strike once more. Attention now turns to Central and Eastern China. As I mentioned earlier,
just important, whenever you're watching kind of like a history channel, you should just remind yourself what has changed and what is the same. You know, and it's like, disappearing student activists, prison camps, torture, attacking student groups, accusing them of being foreign agents or communist agents, torture. Not much has changed. All right, everybody. I'm going to call it there. Thank you so much for supporting the stream. I really love all you guys. I'll be back tomorrow.